Okay, howdy guys. We'll get started. I'm not sure how many have joined yet, but they won't miss too much at the start anyway. Welcome. For those that don't know me, my name's John Carhill and I'm one of the owners of the Melbourne-based online lure store, Ebb Tide Tackle with Andy Smith. And our whole business is all about all things lure fishing. So my session today is about as much as I can pack into the available time on targeting Southern Bluefin Tuna on the cast, something that I'm really passionate about and do a hell of a lot of. I've been almost exclusively lure fishing as my preferred technique for about 15 years now, and very rarely do I troll or use a bait of any sort. Pretty much any fish you want to target can be caught on a lure if you want to put your mind to it. We're really blessed in Victoria having ready access to the Southern Bluefin Tuna in the numbers that we've got, because they are a sensational lure fishing target. And I'll take you through my slide as we talk along. So a little bit about the background of Southern Bluefin Tuna. They're an extremely important commercial species, I'm sure you know, and they're heavily long-lined in New South Wales predominantly, and they're penned in South Australia where they're reared to market size, and our SBTs end up all around the world. They're quite a lucrative industry, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of pressure on that species. And about a decade ago, there were some significant changes to quotas that we're starting to see the benefits of now, because they were absolutely heavily overfished. They started to come back in some numbers, and you might remember a decade or so ago, the boom years at Portland, where numbers really came back and people discovered tuna again and hit them really hard. It was a bit of a gold rush era down at Portland in the west, and everyone was flocking there in great numbers, and there was massive queues at the ramp. It's died down a little bit from that now. People are used to having access to bluefin tuna, and it's kind of only really when we have a run of big fish, of barrels, that people get excited like that. But a lot of people rely on Southern Bluefin Tuna for their regular recreation, and we're no different. Stocks are recovering. They're classified as recovering. And from what I see on the water, I agree with that. I'm seeing more bluefin every year. And this last spring into summer into autumn was sensational. And I'm sure they're out there in numbers right now. But with COVID, we can't get out there and target them. But we can get ready for when we can next. So that's the state of the play. Now, what's this topwater caper, you might say? In really, really simple terms, it's casting a lure and retrieving it in the top part of the water column. On top is considered the purest way, like right across the surface, but subsurface is completely acceptable to be called topwater. Essentially, we're talking about using stick baits and poppers. So why topwater fishing for bluefin? What's the fuss about it? For me, it's a number of things. It's all about the hunt, being able to feel, see, and experience the eat. Often when we catch tuna on a trolling outfit, that hit and that first run happens whilst the rod is still in the rod holder, and we actually then just fight a fish back to the boat. Whereas that hit, that visual and that stream off is the absolute best bit. And as a topwater angler, you get to experience it. So I'm going to take you through a little video now. If this doesn't whet your appetite, probably nothing will. So it only goes for a minute. I'm not going to talk, just hopefully the audio comes through and you can enjoy it. So that's the fun part, all right. That video gets me keen again. I wish we were out fishing now. But it's not just about being a technique of choice. That's how I want to fish. On some occasions with bluefin, in fact, fairly often, it almost becomes a necessity. And I'm sure you would have experienced this if you fished for bluefin. The scenario on the right, when they are locked into tiny anchovies, they are so fussy, they are so particular, and getting a skirted lure small enough or accurate enough to that bait size is virtually impossible. And you can have incredibly frustrating days where tuna are out there feeding hard and you just can't get a bite. On the left of the screen there is milling tuna, and we saw that so much this summer, where fish are up on the surface, they're in numbers, and they are quite fussy. They're flighty, they don't like bites going near them, so firing a cast from a distance is a much better technique than trying to drive a boat straight over the top of them. And when you get a couple of boats doing that, those fish go down, and effectively no one actually catches them. So what's on offer out there for us targeting bluefin on topwater tackle? And it's the great range of fish that's available in Victoria currently, like anything from your 10 to 15 kilo schoolies, which you can have just awesome fun catching and releasing them in numbers or keeping what you need, through to big ones. Like that one on the right is Aaron Dillon, a great friend of Ebb Tides. And we were present that day. That's a 62 kilo bluefin caught on the cast. He knocked that over in 10 minutes. I'm telling you, a lot of guys on proper game gear would not have landed that fish in 10 minutes. It's serious tackle, it's serious gear. Now, the 100 kilo barrier hasn't been burst through yet in Victoria. It has in South Australia. It nearly has in New South Wales. It's going to happen in Victoria. We personally have been hooked up to these big fish, but we've had things go against us and we've made mistakes, and the fish has won. But it's going to happen, and it won't be just us. There's plenty of people out there now chasing jumbos on top water, and just a shame right now we can't be doing it right now. So there's a great range of opportunities that exist. You know, bluefin of all sizes, from little 8 kilo rats up to 30 kilo models that were really common this summer. It's a bit perplexing, the run of fish that we get. It used to always be school size fish, which we class as anything up to probably 25 kilograms, or they were jumbos. We're actually seeing a difference in size class now, more like what they get in New South Wales, where we're seeing 25s, 30s, 40s, fish like Aaron, 60 kilos. There's a greater range of sizes coming through. Most notably, before we got locked down again, I was fishing with my wife, Apollo Bay and Port Fairy, and the size of the fish was minute. We were talking about bluefin that were 3 or 4 kilos. It's a healthy fishery out there, and there's lots of bait for them. So I think there's great things to come for the future. So where do you start in this topwater game? What do you do to, go from a troller or someone that's never fished for bluefin and get into topwater? For reference, before I get into that fish right there in that slide is a quality fish. That fish was 31 kilograms clean, and I caught that out of Western Port between Flinders and Seal Rock. So it's on our doorstep, guys, at the right times of the year when they happen to be in our neighbourhood. So the first thing you obviously need is an offshore capable boat. It doesn't have to be a centre console like mine. That is my boat. It's a Sportsman Island Reef 19. And I can give you a little boat show announcement. I just got off the phone with Cameron Bowe, the owner of Sportsman Boats Australia. And these are American boats, and the Island Reef 19 and 17, they ceased manufacturing them. Some really big news. They are going to be manufactured in Australia. It's breaking news. It's fresh today. You're going to see in the coming months, the Island Reef 19 actually built in Australia. And if that interests you, and I know it will interest a lot of people, hit up Cameron at Sportsman Boats Australia. But regardless of whether you're in a centre console or you're in a caddy cabin or a half cab, Southern Ocean can be a really nasty place, and Bass Strait. So make sure before you venture out doing this, you've done your homework, you've got your safety gear, and you yourself are offshore capable. It can be a very unfriendly place. But when you go out, when you finally got your offshore boat ready and the forecast is good, I encourage you to commit to the cause. Leave the trolling gear at home and go out with casting gear only, and you'll be surprised at the results. We often hear of people that go out with their trolling gear and some casting gear, and they have a bit of an each way bet. And when they don't get the bust up of their dreams, or they have a couple of casts and don't get a fish, they give up and they start to troll. And the typical thing is, oh, there were no bust ups, so, I didn't cast. Commit to it. Leave that trolling gear at home and go out hard. So heading out to sea, basically, as soon as I've cleared probably 10 meters of water, I start looking for the early signs in the sky. And as per Lee Rayner's chat before, find the bait, you will find the tuna. And nature gives us a lot of visual signals to find the bait. And diving gannets are probably the best thing that I can see. Get gannets when they are piling in. There's two slides there. When they're piling in like this, there is bait. It's up high in the water. It's probably being pushed up by predators. And usually when it's gannets, it's also bigger bait. It'll probably mean pilchards or red bait. And usually when you see this, you are going to have a good day. But very, very often, it's terns. Noticing it particularly this season, but it's certainly not unique. There are a hell of a lot of frogmouth anchovies, which is that small bait I showed in that earlier slide. They are quite small. They don't get very big. Terns love them. Tuna love them. They plow through the schools, taking mouthfuls as they go. And these terns are literally right above the feed. If you see terns flittering above the water, dipping down, I can promise you they are tuna right under those birds. Not even 5 meters away, directly underneath them. If you're casting to the leading edge of the terns, you're landing it on the nose of the tuna. I can promise you that. But on days where the birds are a little bit less obvious, a single tern hovering or slowly moving along, but paying attention down into the water is a really good sign. You could have a single bird, and below him could be the mother lode of fish, but not necessarily feeding right now. Maybe they're not feeding because they're not hungry, or not switched on, or maybe they have no bait present. But come a tide change, or simply get a cast in there now. You're not going to wait. You can a single bird can turn into one of the best days you might have on the water. It's not just these kind of, I don't know, the right way to use it. The birds that we want to see, sometimes shearwaters or mutton birds, as a lot of people call them, which are kind of a bit of a pest. They fly into your line, they get hooked up. They're a bit dumber. They attack your lures, and you often end up hooked up with them. But if there's nothing else around, and there are either a bunch of shearwaters sitting on the water in a raft, they can be often sitting on bait that's quite deep. If they're sticking their head in the water regularly and quite excited, there is bait there or tuna there. But if you see shearwaters all flying in one direction, they're all going one way, I can promise you there is a bait ball or bait or tuna in the direction that they are going. They do this for a living, and we're amateurs by comparison. So whatever you do, make sure you don't ignore these guys if there are no other signs. They can be time wasters, but so often they've led me to fish. Now, it's not just about what's in the sky. The sea mammals are a huge indicator of the presence of bait. Whales and dolphins in particular very often mean big tuna, and you'd be a fool to ignore them. Obviously, you've got to remember your distance requirements in regards to whales, but you can work a bait ball. Just be careful and don't ignore these guys. Seals as well. When you've got an environment where you've got dolphins, seals, and whales together, it's fairly unlikely that there won't be tuna there somewhere. So pay attention to all those seabirds and mammals. But if you've got nothing else, there's a few other things to keep an eye out for. And one is this. Now, you're not going to see into the water like this, but they are tuna moving through there. You can see 3 or 4. It's quite murky. That's actually in Western Port Bay. That's why it is that colour. But tuna up to a few metres deep actually leave this on the surface. And I'll use my mouse here to indicate a line of tuna that are swimming along. Those fish are actually probably a couple of metres under the surface of the water, but each one of those fish leaves a V, and as they swim along, the V tunnels above, below, and to the sides, and leaves this effect on the water. Keep an eye out. If water doesn't look quite right, it's very often tuna or at least bait, and we're happy to see either. Add 5 knots of wind, and that is actually a lot harder to see for sure. But keep your eye out and you'll be surprised that even in perhaps say 15 knots of wind, you can pick up tuna relatively close to the surface like this. It is crazy when you're attuned to this, what you see, and it's astonishing what you see other boats miss and drive past or drive straight over the top of this, not even knowing what they're going over. It happens so often. The other thing that you've got on hand is your sonar technology. And excuse me, I use a Simrad units, the NSS Evo 3s. I've got one on the helm, one up on the bow. But key to this whole system is a transducer choice that suits. I use an AMR SS175 high wide, which is a transducer specifically designed for pelagic fish and finding bait up in the water column. It's not your transducer of choice to find bottom fish in deep water. It's not made for that at all. It's made to find bait and pelagics up high. And most of what I do in my boat is tuna and kingfish, so it's perfect for me. But what's really important is that your sonar, whatever it is, will read at speed. If you lose your reading and the bottom very, very quickly at low speeds, you really need to look at that if you are on the hunt for tuna. You need to be able to find bait, and you need to be able to find fish themselves as you are zooming on and covering many, many miles. For us as casters, we probably cover more water than most people because we are literally just driving until we find the signs that we want before we start to fish. Whereas a troller might go, oh, this will do, and they'll throw in the spread and start trolling. We don't do that. We might stop and have a cast. If it's not happening, if it's not right, we'll keep going. So this sounding that you see right there is their barrel bluefin. They are very, very big fish. And in fact, that little bit of video that I showed earlier, Lydia hooked up to what was obviously a big one, was a jumbo off that lot of bait down at, of those fish down at Bridgewater. This slide here is near Apollo Bay, and they are schoolfish. They're actually quite good schoolfish in that range of 20 to 25 kilograms. And there was no sign of bait, very, very little sign of bait there. It was just a massive fish in our, I think it was in February or January when, actually I can tell you it was Australia Day. So in January. And those fish rose from 15, 20, 25 meters to the surface to smash lures all day. And between us and another boat, Aaron Dillon, we would have probably comfortably put 150 to 200 tuna on the deck and released that day. It was an amazing day's fishing. And I can promise you, if you find fish 20, 25 meters deep, don't think for one moment that they won't rise to smash a surface lure. It's 2 beats of their tail if they want to come up. I'm not saying they always will, but don't think that you can't catch these fish on the surface because they happen to be down, this deep or that deep. I'd comfortably say we've pulled fish up from 30 meters, maybe not on the first drift over them, but the second or third drift, they start to come up, they get interested in what's going on, and next, bang, you are into a hot bite. If nothing else, and Lee Rayner mentioned this in his chat earlier today, if nothing else, if all you can find is really solid amounts of bait, I am loath to leave that. It's often at the tide change that the fish will make an appearance and it can be game on. So it's a line call. You don't leave fish to find fish. Do you leave bait to find fish? That's a call for you, but I'm more inclined to stay with that rather than leave it. So a decade ago, a lot of people would have said you need to go to the shelf to find SBT. You need to go out to the horseshoe, etc. And I'm not going to refute that advice for a moment, because there are a hell of a lot of tuna that come down and around our shelf line. But what we've learned over the years is how many actually come in close. And I actually haven't been to the shelf in Victoria in, I don't know how many years. It's been quite a while now. Generally speaking, I find my tuna, the shallowest I've found bluefin is 8 meters behind surf break. And I haven't fished in deeper than 100 meters in a very, very long time. Probably spending most of my time between 25 and 75 or 80 meters deep. It was often thought also that not many fish came through Bass Strait itself. I think the last few years have debunked that, because it hasn't been random. It hasn't been, oh, it happened once. We're finding year after year fish going through Bass Strait in significant numbers. Now, we also know they're going around Tassie. We know that that's happening. We know ideas about the migration, but I think we know less than we actually think. And the directions when they're crossing, I'll say this, and I had a chat with Scotty Gray about this the other day. We actually don't think that there is a month in the year that you can't find southern bluefin tuna in Victoria. So there you go. If you're prepared to go out and do the miles and have a look, the bluefin are out there. And if you don't trust me, trust Scotty, because he's on the water pretty much every second day. So here's a couple of animations. This is provided by Tuna Champions, and I'll speak about those guys a little bit later. But this was the 24th of February. We went out with Sean Tracy from Tuna Champions and Richie Abella on Dreamcatcher 2 sport fishing, and we put 2 sat tags on. Have a look at the animation of this fish that we tagged out in front of Port Phillip Heads, probably in about 40 or 50 meters. I'll just get this video to play. See where it originally got tagged, and you see it did a couple of pretty significant moves, both east and west, almost getting across to Port Welshpool and then to the west, almost across to Warrnambool and down to almost King Island. It certainly covered some water, but what was interesting, 2 months later when the tag popped off, it was back again in front of Port Phillip Bay, in front of the heads, roughly off Barwon Heads, say, for example. So that's, you weren't going to be able to catch that fish all throughout that 2 months that the tag was popped, but someone could have, as it moved basically throughout Victoria. I'd love to know where it is now. There's so much incomplete information, obviously, about science, but I think that gives a real good demo of these fish hung around in Victoria for a significant period. Now, I've got another one to show you. This is quite old. I'm pretty sure this was Al McGlashan tagging this fish again with Tuna Champions, and it was tagged off the east coast of Tasmania. I'll press the animation. And you'll notice it went up the coast of Tassie, went out wide for a bit, coming into the Bass Canyons and seemingly going right over the top of Flinders Island, which I'm sure it didn't. But you'll notice it actually spent a lot of time again off Port Welshpool before then moving back east again through the canyons to it's almost off Malakuta there, or Eden, or almost Wombourne, before the tag popped up. But what this is doing is actually challenging which way these fish come and approach and come through our waters. So my whole advice out there is actually get out there and have a look. The amount of fish that I've caught personally from Port Mac through to, say, the middle of Phillip Island is the bulk of my fish. I haven't done a lot of fishing for tuna to the east. And I don't think a lot of effort goes into it personally, but the numbers of fish we're getting through Central Bass Strait, I personally can't see why the same fishery isn't extending through the east. Time will tell, and perhaps more tags or more guys getting out there from the east of Victoria. So let's get into a little bit of how do you actually get into the top water aspect of it. How do you get a cast in? We've spoken about finding the fish, and that's all good. I think you'd probably have a good idea how to do that now. But we see a lot of people muck up how they approach a school of bluefin, and you probably see it with salmon or any other species that feeds on top. Often boats approach it in a way that they put the fish down. So this is actually a slide from America where there is a massive bluefin tuna fishery, and topwater over there is actually a really big thing where they used to be trollers. So the whole idea here, it's called the run and gun. The idea is to be the first person to the feed, to the bust up, to whatever's going on, is to approach from the side and upwind. Upwind allowing you to fire a long cast and not get over the top of the tuna and spook them. And you want to cast ahead of that feed. And the idea in the perfect world is that if everyone's doing that, we can all have a go, we can all hook up and pull off to the side. I know that's not going to happen, say down at Portland when there's a barrel bust up and everyone's on, but this is the theory. And if you get fish on your own, I advise you to approach it this way. It's all easy when there's a bust up, but when you're not getting that obvious sign of, oh, that's tuna and they are feeding, when you're getting those signs of, oh, there's bait through this whole area, oh, there's scattered birds, oh, there's dolphins everywhere, which is exactly what Lydia and I had only a few weeks ago off Flinders, when you saw a couple of very big bluefin caught out there. There was masses of dolphin, there was bait everywhere working over an expansive area. So a troller, it would be quite easy to just put your spread out and troll through that, you know, do your pattern. For a caster, that's actually a lot harder. So what we do in an environment like that, where we're not sure exactly where the fish are and they're spread out, we employ a drift line, working out what's the predominant influence. Is it the current? Is it the wind? And we set ourselves up to basically drift through, cast left and right. And if we do eventually get a hookup, we obviously mark it and come back around to make sure we go through that drift line again, specifically where the hookup was, because so often it can be a case of they don't move very far. And Lee mentioned that in his chat as well. So they're two very basic techniques. There are a bunch more, but they're two that'll serve you quite well: the run the gun and blind casting through a likely area. Onto the tackle, the exciting gear if you're a gear freak. Tuna casting is all about spin gear. It's really got no significant place for overhead tackle. I'm talking Shimano sizes now. I use Shimano, so that's the sizes that I know. I'll range from a 5,000 size reel for small schoolfish, right up to an 18 or a 20,000 size for targeting jumbos. I probably find myself using an 8,000 size most often. Spin reel's a spin reel, whether it's high quality or not. But what is really significantly important in bluefin tuna casting is the rod. And let me talk you through why. And I can't overemphasize this. So we can be casting really small lures to match the hatch. That's a 30-gram lure. And we can be casting a significant distance to a feed or a bust up. And when tuna are flighty, you need to keep your boat away from them. It can send them down in an instant. And in fact, even being on an electric motor sometimes can be too much noise. So you do need to fire long casts, and they need to be accurate as well. Now, those two things are simple enough, and I'm sure you'd understand all that. But have a look at this. This is a video of a Hoke Bullfighter 150. These are rods that we use here in Australia and in fact sell them. This is a mid-range size rod, a 150, which to me, you can catch any school-sized bluefin. I'd be actually pretty comfortable using this rod up to probably 50, even 60 kilogram fish. It wouldn't be my choice for mega barrels. I'd go to a 170 or a 200, but let me show you why. So we've got that soft tip so we can cast a long way, a small lure, but bluefin tuna are strong fish. They pull hard and they do circle work deep under the boat. They're hard to lift. So this is a 14 kilogram dead weight. That is a lot of lifting power. And what's noticeable is for the angler there on that rod, that's a really comfortable position. If you go out there with a stiff GT rod, you're going to get a scenario where it doesn't bend enough and that fish will actually break you, if it's a big one especially. So bear that in mind. There are specialist tuna rods for a very good reason. And if you want to chat to us about hook rods later or tuna rods in general, hit us up in the chat afterwards. Now, onto the lures. I'm going to try and be pretty quick here, but this is the obvious, really important part of the equation. We're using everything in between 30-pound braid for the small fish, all the way up to 100-pound braid for the jumbos. I'll show you really quickly on the cam. That's the, it's a bit tricky. That's the little Jackfin Pelagus 90S. That's the one that we're reaching for most of the time with fussy bluefin on anchovies, or the Jackfin Lara, which is, Lara is like a real anchovy. It's been designed to imitate a anchovy. When they're on bigger baits, we're on like 165 mil lures, the Jackfin Pelagus 165S, and have a look at this gorgeous thing in the red bait pattern, which has been absolutely slaying it. So that's the Jackfin range. The guys up in New South Wales that are hitting the yellowfin and the big bluefin up there now, they're using a lot more the 200 size to match their sauries. And they're doing really, really well on those. Some other ones that we rate highly are the Amagari range from Spain. And they are handcrafted timber, sensational lures. The life that is in these lures is amazing. Swims like a fish, basically. That's the Epicari, which is a diving popper. At the cheaper end of the range, well, you know, well affordable, Megabass or Poi. You can see how beaten up it is. It's caught a few. And it's not always about stick baits. It's funny, when they're on these anchovies and they're really hard to catch, sometimes a popper works. And the Hero Skipjack, a really affordable way to get into it. And nothing in this world beats a popper bite. So what you're seeing there is basically my tuna tackle box. And I don't take out much more than that. Now, how are we going for time? Yeah, we're going along all right. So moving along to hooks. For the most part, I've used heaps of trebles on tuna lures. In a lot of cases, it makes them swim better. They hold in the water a little bit better. We've moved a lot away from trebles though. They do a hell of a lot of damage to fish, to their mouth, and tuna especially. When their tuna get their head shakes up with a treble in their mouth, you almost get into a point where that fish probably isn't going to release. Its mouth's torn up and it's bleeding bad. So we've moved over to singles, and we're quite surprised if you get the tuning right that that stick baits can swim, and poppers, just as well with a single hook, and less damage to the fish. If it's a big one, you're not going to bend it out, and they are a hell of a lot stronger, and they've got a lot better purchase on the fish. Shout Ring Kadakos or the Satuki Crafters, which you can also get in barbless. So if you want to take it next level, and if you want to take the Tuna Champions Challenge, let's say you're getting your bluefin tuna without a barb on it. And it's a simple matter, guys. Keep the line tight and you won't drop the fish. It's virtually that simple. Some people are very attracted to barbs, and they won't get away from them. But you don't need them, to be honest. They're actually there to hold bait on, not for anything else. So on that point, bluefin are a sensational catch and release target. Got to look after them. You know, dragging them into the boat and letting them thrash around the bottom isn't going to be very good for them. We do actually try to release them in the water where possible. You'll see on that screen that's behind me, we're using a hook out gun in the water to remove a single from a fish. So we're coming to the towards the pointy end, guys. Just a quick word about Tuna Champions, who we are associated with. Really proud to be associated with this organisation and cause. And they're really two simple messages about it for me that attract me to it. One is I'm a meat eater. I like to eat fish, but I love their message of, if you're going to keep your tuna, do the right thing and look after it. Make sure that it's bone spiked. Make sure it's bled. Make sure it's pithed. Make sure it's in an ice slurry as quick as you can get it. And it makes such a difference to the eating quality. I was a bit skeptical about all of those steps being necessary. It's amazing the difference that it makes if you follow each and every one of them. So if you like eating tuna, get stuck into it that way, and it will actually freeze better as well. Personally, I like to just take one fish when I go out. That's my choice. And the rest I let go, which is the other part of the Tuna Champions message. If you're going to be catching and releasing these fish, look after them so that they do survive. Look after the stock. Moving towards the end, guys. I hope I've told you a bit about bluefin tuna topwater in Victoria. Cheers, guys. Thank you.